Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and today we're going to be discussing the history of Genesect as a Pokemon that's been in Overused. For those of you who don't know, it's been banned in Generation 5, 6, 7, and now, as of today, Generation 8 as well. It was voted 7 to 1 to be quick banned from OU, alongside Naganadel, which got banned 8-0. I already posted a video on that yesterday, or the day before, depending on when I post this, so definitely be sure to check that video out. It'll also address some other tiering questions on the future of SSOU in the current Hunter metagame, but this video is going to be a bit of a blast from the past. We're going to be going through Genesect from Generation 5, 6, 7, and of course, we're going to also touch on the Generation 8 sets as well. What made Genesect too good for all these tiers? Because it was suspected Generations 5, 6, and 7. Now it's quick ban on Generation 8, I believe. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of suspect attention, perhaps more than any Pokemon that's only been around for the last 4 generations. And we're going to go ahead and examine what made it so controversial, what made it so good. And Generation 5 was the initial introduction of Genesect. It was released in the middle of generation, and it came out, and unsurprisingly, it was an absolute monster. It was potent. It hit super hard. Really, there were only 3 sets that we saw, however, though. This is, I believe, before the Genesect event. Don't quote me on that, though. And on top of that, it was before we really kind of had a fully fledged picture of how people elected to abuse Genesect over the generations, one could say. So there were 3 sets, and one of them that was used the most, perhaps, was the Choice Scarf set. And it's funny because in other generations, you could argue that the Choice Scarf set was actually the least problematic of all of the sets that Genesect ran. Why is that? Well, mainly because the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of checks to it. There's things like Toxapex and, Clefable for special Scarf sets, or for physical Scarf sets, things like, Heatran and Celesteela are really able to, do the trick there. So there were a number of Pokemon that were looming around the tier that definitely kept it in check over this generation, with the power creep being present, but the defensive power creep perhaps not being the same. Genesect Scarf set alone was just a complete killing machine. Not only was it the best revenge kill the metagame had ever seen, but also it was an outright major threat. It ran Thunderbolt. Usually, it could have potentially ran another move over Thunderbolt, though, and then Ice Beam, Flamethrower, and U-Turn were all staples on this set. We saw a more special-oriented Scarf than physical-oriented Scarf, although physical-oriented Scarf was used in Black and White Ubers. In fact, it even ran Explosion sometimes to help take out an Arceus, trade with an Arceus for him. So, yeah, but since this video is geared more towards OU, we're going to stay in that lane. And needless to say, Scarf Genesect was just amazing in this metagame due to the combination of speed, coverage, and abuse of the ability to download. However, that was not all there was to it. In fact, you could argue that while Scarf Genesect alone was ban-worthy, the other sets were just as good. Expert Belt and the Life Orb Rock Polish sets were amazing, simply put it. Rock Polish with Bug Buzz, Flamethrower, and Giga Drain was a set that really caught on during Genesect Suspect in the later stages of it. People using things like Specially Defensive Gastrodon to sort of semi-check the special-oriented sets, and Giga Drain just was a complete killer against that. Also did well against Rotom Wash and Politoed, Pokemon that could soft-check it as well. All in all, it made it so that the download Genesect with Rock Polish, it's just a complete force to be reckoned with. Bug Buzz and Flamethrower covering most of the things. You could, of course, run Ice Beam over Bug Buzz as well, but there are a whole myriad of different possible items and moves you could use as we went into later on and other options. But also, there was Expert Belt for attacks we saw here. It was probably the least common of the 3, but in my eyes, it was still pretty solid. Bug Buzz, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Flamethrower, just some options that it could use that are fairly standard. We saw some with Thunder on Rain. Obviously, Rain teams tend to drop Flamethrower, or you can at least consider doing so. Hidden Power Ground is good if you want to hit Heatran. Explosion is a viable option as well, and if you want to use it on Sun teams with Ninetales, Solar Beam could be used too. We've also seen some other things as well. We saw substitute sets. We even saw a couple of Choice Specs variants, I believe, but all in all, this captures the essence of what Genesect was to the Black and White metagame. Very few checks, very few counters, even less counters, honestly. And all in all, it was just too much for the metagame. So eventually, we banned it. It got suspected after Carolina was freed, and from there, it got banned pretty convincingly. Generation 6 took a bit of a different shape to Genesect. While the Scarf set was still viable, as you see down here, there were more breaker-oriented sets, which I would truly put it over the top. For example, Life Orb 4 attacks. The Life Orb 3 attacks for Shift Gear was very common. It could even run mixed or different coverage moves like Thunderbolt. We saw some Giga Drain, etc. And honestly, I think that Bug Buzz Ice Team Flamethrower is fairly common, but my memory kind of slips me. There have been other things we've seen. Also had to run a Hasty Nature with Shift Gear. You could run Rock Polish as well if you don't feel like bluffing physical. There was a whole debate over that. I honestly don't remember how the chip settled at the end of Genesect's reign in OU, but the point is that speed boosting sets with coverage abuse and stab abuse with download abuse, which is really strong. There's also a focus set that people like CBB used a lot. Bug Buzz, Hidden Power, Ground Flamethrower, Extreme Speed, just an example of it. You could, of course, run Ice Beam or drop Stab and just killing shit left and right. And what was a pretty offensive metagame when things like Genesect and other Ubers were allowed down at the start. Also, this generation was like the invention of Choice Band Genesect, the event, Extreme Speed, and the Nature and all that. That's why all of them run Shiny, by the way, to bluff that. Also, it's Nature Locked and Hasty, but it's fine because you tend to use Ice Beam with Landorus T and Garchomp and Gliscor being all over the place. Yeah, U-Turn Ice Beam, Iron Head, Extreme Speed. And honestly, without Toxic being in the tier, it was super strong. Really only walled by things like specific Skarmories and whatnot. So yeah, Genesect was an absolute threat, absolute pain in the ass to deal with. Nothing really countered it besides Heatran. And there was also Choice Scarf sets, of course, on speed that wasn't based off of locking into it. Non-stab Extreme Speed as well, which can go such a long way in my eyes. So yeah, there's also XY OU Genesect. A Pokemon that in my eyes was even more broken in Black White OU Genesect due to the versatility. And I think that's something that I want to go ahead and pause this little generation to generation analysis here and say, there are a lot of Pokemon that have a ton of versatility. Look at Tyranitar. Look at Hydreigon or Heatran. Heatran has dozens of different sets. You can run Special Defensive. You could run Magma Trapper. You could run Choice with Eruption. You could run Sub Torment. You could run a Roar set with Hazard. You could run Magma Physically Defensive, Magma Offensive. You could run Power Solar Beam. This goes on and on. Yeah, maybe only 4 or 5 see mainstream usage, but you could come up with a dozen viable sets for Heatran. You could use so many different combinations of Tyranitar or Garchomp or Hydreigon, Dragapult, etc. There's so many versatile Pokemon, but versatility alone isn't necessarily an argument to make something broken or even particularly great in the metagame. For example, there are plenty of Pokemon in lower tiers with amazing move pools that we see do really well there, but maybe not so good in OU. Why is that? Versatility alone is a thing that you can slap on anything that gets a lot of moves or has, interesting type coverage, and that's cool, but how it uses that, the practical impact, the essence of the Pokemon, given that built-in versatility, is what truly matters. How we tier things, how the game is played, it's solely based in reality that is the metagame itself. It's based off of practice, how we play the game, and what is executed in that practice. Moreover, Genesect was one of the best abusers of versatility that Pokemon has ever seen. It made use of all those coverage moves coupled with an ability that boosted one of its attack stats every time it entered, and that alone made it arguably broken in any OU we've ever seen before, and that has held true. The test has held true in that it has now been banned in all 4 generations. In fact, now it's even getting more lopsided in each generation, and now it was a quick ban, which it says a lot about how Genesect ages, how the versatility goes from generation to generation and truly molded into something that's just too much for each metagame. And I think that that's cool because a lot of people trying to just slap on, X Pokemon's too versatile, run too many sets, like Magearna, for example, last generation. But the fact of the matter is that none of those singular sets were broken. All of them had multiple checks and counters, and a lot of those checks and counters overlapped. Whereas Genesect, and honestly some other things as well, could handpick its checks and counters besides maybe, emphasis on maybe Heatran. And I think that alone is ridiculous because you can build your team around being strong against certain things or weak against other things and use your Genesect set to kind of tailor-make it for that, to the point that you're going to be too strong offensively and nothing's going to be able to hold up against you in the long haul. And that makes it so that the Genesect is not only makes it so easy for balanced teams to just be so breaker heavy that then it's not going to validate offense, but also it makes offense even stronger to the point that you're not even going to be able to use both your teams. It kind of is a double whammy in a sense to that. Genesect may never be balanced in OU, and I think we have to accept that that might be the reality. I don't know if we're going to necessarily start a ban next generation because there's so many different things introduced each generation, but would I be shocked if it ends up banned generation 9, 10, 11, etc.? I can't comment on those tiers because I don't know them, but I wouldn't be shocked. No, it's Genesect, and that's why. And I think that this is kind of the thesis of this video, if you will, and that Genesect is the epitome of timely versatility, practical versatility, effective use of versatility, making the most of its move pool. And Generation 7 Genesect is perhaps one of the best examples of that. It was able to use things like a Choice Band, with physical attacking of course, or a Life Orb set with 4 attacks, all special, or even on the flip side, a Dallas Drive set which is mixed but special oriented, luring things like Heatran, and making it so you don't rely so much on Ice Beam for things like Gliscor and Landorus T as well. Or the Scarf set, the classic Scarf set as well. All in all, with things like Toxapex, Celesteela, and bulky things like Chansey in the tier with also increased defog distribution to make it so that everything that's switching into it isn't taking as much hazards. It actually made Genesect take a bit longer to get banned than many thought it would, and it wasn't as lopsided as a margin as many thought it would. Like, for example, it was a no-brainer for me, but people like ABR, actually, someone who's very outspoken and one of the best players of all time, did not think Genesect was broken at first, and I completely understand why. But all in all, it adapted to every single trend to counter and check it over time to the point where we were like, okay, we really have to do something to keep it in check, get it out of this metagame because it's just too much. And guess what? Lo and behold, it got suspected and then eventually banned. And for more than justified reasoning in my eyes. Genesect, the fact of the matter is that it had too much going for it. You want to run physical sets, one of the best choice banders in the tier. You want to run special sets, one of the best life orb all-out attackers metagame. You want to run Scarf, one of the best revenge killers metagame. You want to run a lure set like Dow's Drive or Expert Belt, one of the best lures in the metagame. And it could handpick what it's luring, especially with hidden power in the games you'd run, or Techno Blasting games. You could, lure things like Heat Train. You want to, be walled by Toxpex, that's fine. You can run things that abuse Tox. You want to be walled by Tran? Fine. Run things that abuse Tran. You could handpick the counters, tailor make it to your team perfectly, and all of a sudden, it's just far and away too much for the metagame. And honestly, that was more of the same this generation. We did see maybe a bit of a different set mix with no real life orb all attackers. We did see some heavy duty boost all attackers or Techno Blast all attacker sets, but also there was the choice band and the choice scarf sets, much like the old. In fact, the physical sets arguably were better this generation than ever before due to how punishing the combination of Iron Head with a download attack boost and choice band could be. Same with U-Turn, doing so much damage even to resisted Pokemon. Extreme Speed was super practical in this early metagame as well. So all in all, Genesect's brief history, it's been 4 generations of absolute terror. It has, inflicted on the OU metagame, and I gotta say, each and every one of them has found a unique way to be broken. And Black-White, due to being an absolute stone-cold killer on the revenge killing side, and one of the best sweepers with Rock Polish, it proved to be too fast for something so versatile and strong, in a metagame defined by power creep, really shaping how things went in the tone of many games. So the fact that Genesect was able to do that in the face of those conditions, it was able to really stand out from the pack, made it clear that Genesect was a unique force to be reckoned with. It was unlike a lot of other Pokemon that were tested down from Ubers that might even stay in OU. It was clearly something that deserved to be in Ubers that generation. Come Generation 6, it was perhaps a bit more finesse-oriented. We started seeing new sets, be it the invention of the Focus Sash set, or full physical sets with, physical Scarf, or more likely a choice band set, especially thanks to the event giving extreme speed with the hasty nature and shiny lock, which is cool. And while the Scarf set was still solid and the sweeping sets were arguably as good as ever, it really was just a sheer versatility. The fact that it could pan-pick its own checks and counters, that's what made it so good. And when the metagame started gaining more and more defensive leverage, which Generation 6 absolutely did with Fairy types and Magikarp, Regenerator, etc., Defog, you name it, so many defensive tools being added to the metagame, the fact that Genesect was still able to break the mold to an unprecedented extent just showed how effective it was. Moving on to Generation 7, it was a combination of the two, while it also increased viability with the power creep, showing that it's just as strong as, your 140 special attack or physical attack absolute bombs in the metagame. It also had that sheer versatility that made it mold. It could handpick its counters, besides Heat Train, really, you want to Toxpex, run Thunderbolt. You want to, break special walls like Chansey and Blissey, run Choice Band, etc., etc., etc. It could handpick, and that's what made it so good. And in Generation 8, finally, I believe it somehow mastered all of these. Be it the fact that it could be an amazing lure, due to the Technoblast set being super common, the fact that it could be an absolute bomb on the physical end with the choice band set, or it could be a sweeper with rock polish set, and even the revenge killing realm. It was one of the best Scarfers in the early metagame in my eyes. All in all, Genesect is a Pokemon that largely has not only been broken, but arguably uncompetitive to the extent that we really never saw a place for it in OU. It was very clear that it was broken from day one, and I'm glad that we got it out of the way, but I also think it's a very interesting Pokemon to analyze the history of the OU metagame, because it really touched on all of the different ways to be broken, despite only being one single Pokemon. And that's what's so cool about versatile Pokemon. Sometimes it's a double-edged sword in the sense that your versatility means you can only cover so much, but Genesect could cover almost everything, again, besides Heatran, with most sets, and that's amazing. And while unfortunately it's not going to be in the tier, it's a really fun Pokemon to play with, it also is a great thing to study, examine, and see, okay, this is really the root of the problem, this is why, and then maybe apply that logic to future bans or future, lack of bans if those Pokemon don't demonstrate those qualities, for example. And I think that it's something that people that are looking to get into tiering and really understanding why we do what we do, why we ban things or why we don't, could really examine Pokemon like Genesect and their effect on metagames, what it's dictated. For example, Heatran usage spiked up arguably even more than it was at its peak last generation because of things like Genesect and Naganadon. I know there are some conflicting variables in that dynamic, but still, it's really interesting to examine, and I thought it would be a good video to bring you guys. I know this is not like a BKCS video where I'm going 2 hours into the history of Genesect with millions of illusions, tournament games, and replays, but Genesect isn't a Pokemon that really deserves that, because it's only just put its foot in the door each of the 4 generations, barely even making it crack open this generation, as it was around for well less than a week. But despite that, despite the brief stint it's had in each metagame, it still left its impact on those metagames. It's still something that we could discuss in videos like these, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. So be sure to leave your thoughts on Genesect, this generation, and overall in the comments below. And if you guys have any questions, be sure to let me know there, or on my Twitter and my Discord server. I'm very active in both these places, and I love engaging with you guys. And on top of all that, if you could like this video, if you enjoy these type of analytical videos, and if you have any suggestions for future ones, let me know in the comments. And regardless of that, subscribe to the channel, guys. I'm trying to hit 6,000, so let's get there sometime soon. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. All right, guys. Peace out. Bye.